I believed you needed to soak in your misery to produce devastating art, the kind that aches in your audience's lungs. I thought you needed to cut your arteries, twist them, and coil them around the hands of others so they could feel the truth pumping up their arms. All the greats did it that way. Isn't that right? Kafka, Van Gogh. And if the masters of their craft produced art that, despite all the distractions of the modern world, continues to captivate humanity decades later, then they must have done something right. It's an exchange. Art that heals others burns the one who created it. The artist makes a sacrifice because there's no other way. And yet, in my darkest moments, no wisps of creativity could push past the fog numbing my mind. I couldn't bear the weight pinning me down. So how could I pick up my pen? Existing was tiring. Then I learned the history behind Starry Night. It wasn't in the pools of despair where Van Gogh wielded his paintbrush. It was when he had the strength to look outside. It was in recovery. And wasn't it when Kafka was away from his abusive father that he dragged every thought, every emotion bottled up inside, and poured it into creations that speak to the trapped and to the lonely? You can't understand the war when your wounds bleed, just as you cannot comprehend heartbreak when your heart is shredded in front of you. You cannot feel more than pain. You are pain. It's only when you've distanced yourself from it that you can finally transform it into something you can share. It's only when I'm away from it that I can safely look at it, mold it in my hands, and change its name.
If you stumbled across this video, this may not have been what you were expecting. This isn't a video telling you that everything will just be okay, or that all you had to do was just breathe. There are many forms of suffering, many of which won't be simply solved by a single task or a random video essay. But one thing is true. Suffering is an inevitability of life. As Nietzsche once put it, to live is to suffer. But the issue I find with this quote is that many people stop there. The weight of suffering is all-consuming, that we never feel like we can get to the next part, which is, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. And although Nietzsche uses the word survive, I think a better and more fitting word would be recover. This video is for those who are suffering. Because as society, we have incorrectly learned that suffering is the sole cause of greatness. That depending on how we channel our suffering, we can be greater than ever before. But if we continue on that ideology, our mental health crisis and amount of suffering we face will only get worse. We have to focus on what comes after our pain, not the idea of how we can benefit from suffering, but how we recover. Suffering is not the requirement for greatness. Recovery is. Now, recovery is such a varied topic. Your recovery can look vastly different from mine or anyone else's. I want to take this time to highlight the recovery process and provide ways to help kickstart it, especially if you are mentally stuck within your own suffering. Now, as varied are the types of suffering and recovery, there's one key idea, one pillar that you can include in your life to aid in your recovery. Art. Whether that's paintings, writing, dancing, music, movies, video games, and more. I have broken down this video into 3 key components of how we should interact with art of all types. So let's start. I hope this video helps you. There's a quote from a Doctor Who episode that defined my depressive adolescence. It says,
I love old things. They make me feel sad. What's good about sad? It's happy for deep people.
I used to wallow in my suffering, addicted to the brutal feelings it brought me. It felt good to lean into my depression, to let my emotions pour out endlessly in the solitude of my bedroom. It always felt that my sadness and my suffering would make me into what would be this quote-unquote deep person that could find happiness within the sadness. So I cherished my suffering, because I hoped it would transform me into a better person, someone that could be recognized as different from the rest, to feel like I was wearing some badge of dishonor and spared for my brokenness. Similarly to Casey being spared from the beast at the end of the movie Split.
The broken are the more evolved.
But there was a flaw in my understanding of this transformative metamorphosis. There's such an intense and all-consuming presence that suffering causes in your life. It twists its way into every crevice of your existence. And it feels like suffering defines who you are. Or it feels like suffering is all that you will ever be. So how was I supposed to transform into this profound person if I couldn't get out of this suffocating cocoon? The answer is, I couldn't. For as long as I bathed in the waters of my suffering, my body could not shed the carvings etched upon every fingertip. Even the idea of leaving the bath constantly made me question, did I suffer enough to become that deep person I was hoping to be? So I ended up not doing anything about my suffering. Or so I thought. In my depression, I found myself turning to TV shows, movies, and a bunch of video games I love to play. The best way I can explain it is by using the words of actor Ethan Hawke, who explains,
most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about poetry, right? Until their father dies. They go to a funeral, you lose a child, somebody breaks your heart, and all of a sudden you're desperate for making sense out of this life. And has anybody ever felt this bad before? How did they come out of this cloud? Or the inverse, something great. You meet somebody and your heart explodes. You love them so much you can't even see straight. Did anybody feel like this before? What is happening to me? And that's when art's not a luxury, it's actually sustenance. We need it.
Every single piece of art that resonated with me was helping me to move past my suffering and start my recovery. From episodes of Doctor Who to even a random TED Talk from Ethan Hawke, they were putting words to my pain, to my suffering. I was finally able to make sense of what I was feeling, and for a brief moment, I wasn't alone. That's the beauty of art. It helps you find meaning in your pain because it provides you with a feeling of belonging despite how you may feel. This is why we need to consume art. It keeps us alive. Any type of art can truly speak to us, though not everyone will. There will always be so many that resonate with you if you allow yourself to find them. After all,
when we hit our lowest point, we are open to the greatest change.
But you may wonder, how can you enjoy something when you're suffering? You may not want to do anything, and your opinion can quickly sour on everything when there's pain. Hell, I used to loathe doing anything at times. I'd rather sit in a ball of sadness and weep for hours. But even in suffering, I did search for things. I remember searching for the saddest animes of all time, which led me to watching Angel Beats, Clannad, and finally Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which became my favorite anime of all time. I wasn't expecting to love it. I just needed to purge my emotions. But those anime, just like many meaningful pieces of art, provided me a safe space to process my difficult emotions. I now know that even though I wasn't expecting it, consuming art truly did change the way I process emotions going forward, since I had the chance to confront and process them prior. Don't just take my word for it. There are also numerous and recent studies in neuroscience that highlight just how beneficial art is for you and for your brain. In Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us by Susan Meg Salmon and Ivy Ross, they detail numerous studies and the benefits of consuming art. In the book, they write, "For all of us, there are times when life is too much to handle, when anxiety and burnout waylay us. Relieving our stress is as important as eating food, drinking water, and sleeping. And in these moments, the arts and aesthetics make a big difference if you know how to use them. Think of the arts as an activity that changes your biology, emotional state, and enhances your mental well-being. If you are suffering, the first step would be to seek out the works of art that help alleviate or provide an understanding to your pain. Our emotions are not the problem in and of themselves. They are useful biological communicators that have evolved with us over millennia to help us survive. It's getting stuck in our emotions where the problems can arise. For artists such as Van Gogh and Kafka, despite their suffering, they also found numerous artworks throughout their life to inspire them. It's easy to think that they created something from pure talent or suffering alone. But both artists were influenced by meaningful art that changed their lives. For example, Van Gogh was largely inspired by Japanese artworks, and even collected them, as they changed and shaped the way he viewed the world. It's easy to see the inspiration he took from the artworks that helped him find a sense of beauty and recovery throughout his suffering. For Kafka, he was largely inspired by several authors, including Dostoevsky, who he even called his blood brother. It's easy to see the inspiration he took from the books that helped him put words to the complex emotions he was having and contemplating, while also aiding him in his recovery. Consuming art can serve as a starting point to help bring you to the beginning steps of recovery. It's vital that we take the time to find meaningful works of art that can speak to us in even our most trying times. Even now, physicians, psychologists, social workers, and others are prescribing singing classes for stress, museum visits and concert tickets for anxiety, and nature walks for burnout, offering prevention and intervention. But now that we understand how important consuming art is, we have to ask ourselves, what comes next? What if we've seen enough that put words to our suffering, and yet we still are? Well, now we can move on to the next part. Ever since I was a child, the idea of being an artist never really occurred to me. I had learned of the greatest artists of all time in great detail, like Kafka and Van Gogh, but I never strived to be an artist, especially since I hated doing arts and crafts. It made me furious to see what monstrosities I created with my sub-amateur skills, and I became enraged anytime I saw that incredibly smug bull taunting me whenever our teacher brought out gallons and gallons of Elmer's glue. What's worse is that in my 7th grade art class, even though I tried my hardest to create decent works of art, my teacher thought it wasn't good enough, so they gave me a B. How can you even give a B for such a subjective subject when I put my whole freaking heart into it? Anyway, I had lived my life thinking I couldn't be an artist because I couldn't do art. At least, not well. How could I, when we are constantly taught in schools about the greats, but never about the mediocres? How could I write a play that could reach the level of elegant wordplay that Shakespeare created? How could I paint a masterpiece as vivid and as beautiful as Starry Night? How could I take a photo as gorgeous and revered as ones by Ansel Adams? For a long time, I didn't regard myself as an artist because I didn't feel like I was the greatest, partly because I didn't believe I had suffered enough to be the greatest. But then again, nothing required me to suffer enough to be the greatest in order to receive the benefits from creating art. Girija Kaimal, Assistant Dean for Special Research Initiatives and an Associate Professor at the Creative Art Therapies program at Drexel University, found that for the majority of people, making art for as little as 45 minutes reduces your stress hormone, cortisol, no matter your skill level or experience. Creating art, whether it's painting, writing poems, or even just singing in the shower, allows you to engage with a physiologically calming experience. On top of that, you'll have a chance to express yourself in a way that can alleviate your suffering. In my darkest times, I created dozens of YouTube videos, Minecraft maps, and stories that left a profound impact on me that I did not realize. It truly saved me from some of my darkest moments. And yet, I never considered myself an artist because what I created didn't seem like art to me. I had been overcomplicating the idea of art to myself because I had been conditioned to only see greatness in art, while I couldn't see greatness in myself. But art is truly simple, simpler than you can imagine. Art is just your own self-expression, no matter how it may feel to you or to others around you.
Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. As the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse, what will your verse be?
Now, years later, I've been making video essays, many of which I'm tremendously proud of. Each video has allowed me to help put words to what I'm feeling and allows me to create freely. It's serendipitous to look back at my own videos. Each of them truly resonate with how I was feeling in each moment of time and allowed me to understand my complex emotions. I took the pain of my suffering and transformed it into something I am proud of. Take my first video essay, for example. After receiving a life-shattering job rejection, I played The Outer Wilds, and it helped recontextualize my own failures. It's the same reason we attribute art to a particular time of our life. Think about one of your favorite songs. What memories stir within you when you listen to it? Now, when you sing it or even hum the tune, you take it as your own. You let out the feelings within. Those memories that stir within you are still present, but the agency you create now allows you to reshape your memories and the way they make you feel. Now, when it comes to our own suffering, creating art may actually feel a bit difficult. If art is merely our own self-expression, what if we have difficulties expressing ourselves? For some of us, our difficult experiences do reside in the conscious mind. We constantly remember the painful details, but we don't know how to let them out in a way that feels safe or productive. We keep these stories hidden from others, even when we want to share more, because we fear judgment, shame, stigma, or that people won't believe us. It becomes a secret we live with. As a man, it has been a tremendously difficult journey to be able to create art in a meaningful way to express myself. I had been taught that I didn't need to express my thoughts, opinions, or even just myself. But bottling up my emotions and my own self-expression only caused further suffering. All I had to do to work on expressing myself is to try. Creating art will always be an iterative process, and each time we have to be willing to try. Being able to freely express myself with my own videos and art has been a life-changing experience and has helped me through many rough times. For artists such as Van Gogh and Kafka, creating their works of art was undoubtedly therapeutic for them, as it was for me. Both Van Gogh and Kafka suffered throughout their lives, battling feelings of depression, inadequacy, and their own mental illnesses. But when they sat down to paint or to write, they were able to find some relief in their art. Though it didn't take their struggles away, it helped alleviate the pains of their inner turmoils. In our suffering, we can feel powerless, like we don't have a voice amidst all this grief. Art helps individuals like Kafka and Van Gogh to find their voices again and help them recover a sense of self. Because you are truly able to express yourself in a way that is authentic to you. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be award-winning. It has to be you. Creating art needs to be embraced by all ages because it is vital to help us recover and gain a sense of self. Even when young children take part in arts-based programs, they can gain skills for self-reflection, self-expression, and verbal communication. These become the tools that they carry with them, hopefully for the rest of their lives. So in order to journey along our paths to recovery, we need to continue to consume art, to help inspire us and resonate with their experiences. And we need to create art that helps us express ourselves and make sense to our individual experiences. Though creating and consuming art is important, there's one final part to follow to aid in our recovery. For me, and undoubtedly many others, this part will be the hardest. I briefly spoke about creating art as a man, about not being encouraged to express myself and my grief. This is a common trend that I see in our society. Not only do we not allow others to express their grief, they are often stigmatized for it. Stigma deteriorates mental healing because it brings with it an emotional sense of shame, and shame physically inhibits our ability to both share and to heal. So you can wonder, how on earth are we supposed to connect when we feel like we aren't allowed to share our authentic selves? There is no easy answer to this question, but the one that I can offer is that we need to fundamentally change the way we engage with one another. Throughout history, being able to communicate with one another was scarce, but despite its scarcity, we found meaningful ways to communicate with each other through art, such as storytelling through various mediums. It was a form of communication, and we began to perfect it as a way of expressing feelings, beliefs, and observations. Nowadays, the ways we communicate have increased exponentially, allowing many of us to connect with one another at the touch of a button. But somehow, these connections don't feel as meaningful as we would have hoped. There's something about the way we view relationships nowadays. With the rise of social media, connections have undergone a steady and consistent shift towards transactional relationships, where people are relating to one another more for production and output than for greater understanding and meaning. The way that we view relationships nowadays is one of the primary causes of the loneliness epidemic. Many people connect when it's solely beneficial for them because they take an individualistic approach to their existence. This is also the problem when it comes to art. When we consume art, we take in and ascribe our own meanings to it. When we create art, we express our own unique experiences and give our voice to the world. But each of these is missing the dialogue that art creates. Art allows us to reflect on the world around us, but the effects of a particular artwork cannot be assumed to be universal. This will be highly dependent on the viewer's personal knowledge and experiences and their social and cultural environment. The wondrous joy that art can bring is a chance to connect with another in a profound way. Take a piece of art that you love, whether it's a movie, game, painting, song, whatever it may be. When you listen to someone discuss how much it means to them, it reframes not only your appreciation for the work of art, but how you view both yourself and them. It's why hearing others passionately speak about what they love creates such a deep connection within us and understanding to their existence. Though one aspect of communication is often lost with the rise of social media: the lack of dialogue. I'm not saying you shouldn't comment on videos you love or write in-depth reviews for albums you listen to every day. But if your thoughts, passions, and personal artworks are kept to yourself, there isn't any chance to understand others and ourselves deeply. When we are able to do that, it helps us on our path to recovery. It reminds us that our suffering is not solitary. There is a path forward, together. For both Van Gogh and Kafka, their connection to others helped them tremendously, both in their journey as artists and on their recovery. Vincent van Gogh's younger brother, Theo, was a tremendous emotional and financial support over the span of Vincent's life. Through several letters, he encouraged Vincent to keep creating and shared intimate words of affirmation. Theo was a pillar of connection in Vincent's life, and only after both Van Goghs had passed, Theo's wife Joanna took it upon herself to preserve Vincent van Gogh's artworks and letters to his brother. Throughout Kafka's life, he had written hundreds of letters to those he was close to and had deep connections with. One of his recipients was Max Brod, Kafka's closest friend who supported Kafka throughout his life. After Kafka had passed, Max took it upon himself to publish Kafka's works, against Kafka's wishes, who entrusted Max to burn them all. It's simple to say that both Kafka and Van Gogh created beautiful works of art because of their suffering. The reality of their legacy doesn't stem from their suffering, but through their recoveries that were aided by the connections they held deepest. Without them, the ones who loved Kafka and Van Gogh, we never would have been able to appreciate their art today and find our own meanings within them. This is how powerful and important meaningful connections are. We can consume and create art all we want, but our connections with one another allow us to achieve wondrous results and allow us to have a space for us in this world despite our suffering. Having a space for everyone is something I truly believe we need to foster to build deep connections. And it's something I've been trying to champion with my channel. For the past few months, I have been releasing videos about the media that I not only loved, but have meant a lot to me. Oftentimes, I'll invite friends and family on and ask one simple question about the choice of media. What did it mean to you? Just being able to frame your mind to find meaning within art allows for deeper connections to be made and a greater appreciation for figuring out the paths to recovery that our suffering has led us to. After all these years, after my adolescence was defined by that one Doctor Who quote, I now feel that the one that resonates more with me is this one.
To me, Van Gogh is the finest painter of them all. He transformed the pain of his tormented life into ecstatic beauty, but also one of the greatest men who ever lived.
This moment always brings tears to my eyes, not because Van Gogh was someone who suffered, but in that moment, you can see a glimpse of his recovery. Him hearing the appreciation and deep connection from those around him provided him a newfound sense of self and of life. That is what art can do. It can change not only our lives, but the lives of everyone around us, and allow us to connect with one another in greater ways than ever before. When I had started this video, honestly, I felt overwhelmed. How could I speak to everyone's suffering, to everyone's experiences? And how could I create a video that can truly help and resonate with people while also being extensive enough to provide them with the tools to help themselves? The truth is, I can never do that, which some may think could be a bad thing, but it's the most beautiful thing of all. I wanted to create this video in the hopes that people can start on their journeys to recovery. That even though suffering is a part of life, their recovery is the more vital part of their human experience. I do hope everyone finds their path to recovery. That everyone consumes, creates, and connects about art. The most important idea to keep in mind is that adding art into your life isn't the end goal, but can serve as a stepping stone to head to the path of recovery. Just like watching this video or reading Your Brain on Art. I also know that even though this is one video in the thousands or millions of self-help style of artworks, it's still not enough. There will never be enough art in this world, just how I could never talk about everyone else's individual experiences. Our collective stories of trauma and serious mental challenges around the globe are endless, as are the ways the arts sustain us and help us heal. The beauty in that is that we get a world that is waiting for you, a world that wants you to recover and to share your experiences, because they are truly unique to you. and no one will be able to take that away from you. Both Kafka and Van Gogh lived short lives, once plagued with suffering. But the moments where they consumed art, created art, and connected with one another about art made their lives filled with meaning. And they both provided their own unique perspectives on how they saw the world. In suffering, there is always the chance for recovery, to find beauty, meaning, and connection within our world. Your suffering does not erase your worth. Just like both Kafka and Van Gogh, your life is shaping into something profound and always valuable, even if you feel like you can't see it yet. So for those that are suffering, I hope you start your journey to recover. We can't wait to see what you'll do.